Toronto called him a cancer. Pittsburgh called him a champion.
He's a big game player. He's got that knack for scoring big goals.
He didn't look elite. He didn't train elite. He didn't care what anyone thought. They called him the strangest player in hockey. Then he proved that strange was exactly what worked.
All can quick up. Kessel's going to have a breakaway opportunity. Phil Kessel in on goal. He scores!
Stand Phil Kessel next to any NHL player from his era, and the difference is immediate. Where Sidney Crosby carried muscle definition and calculated power, Kessel looked soft around the edges. Where Patrick Kane moved with precision, Kessel's skating stride appeared awkward, almost labored. His shoulders hunched forward. His posture suggested fatigue before the puck even dropped. Scouts called it beer league body language. Opponents learned to call it deceptive. Because what Kessel lacked in appearance, he compensated in performance. His acceleration from a standing position burned defensemen who mistook his physique for limitation. That awkward stride generated speed most trainers couldn't explain. His shot release came faster than goalies could track. The disconnect between what he looked like and what he accomplished on ice created a paradox that the league spent years trying to reconcile. And then there were the hot dogs. According to Toronto's most prominent sports columnist, Phil Kessel was stopping at a street vendor every single afternoon to buy hot dogs. The story became the defining narrative of his Toronto years. The out-of-shape player with out-of-shape habits. We'll get to whether that's actually true later, because the truth is somehow even stranger than the myth. But first, you need to understand the numbers, because they tell two completely different stories. During regular seasons, Kessel produced consistently without dominating. 25 to 30 goals became his standard. 60 to 70 points kept him relevant, but not elite. He ranked as a good player on bad teams, a productive winger who never quite reached superstar territory. Then the playoffs started, and something shifted. His regular season points per game average sat across .77 across his career. In the playoffs, that number jumped to .83. The bigger the moment, the more dangerous he became. In 2016, he led Pittsburgh with 22 points through 24 playoff games. In 2017, he posted 23 points in 25 games, ranking third in the entire league behind only Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. Back-to-back Stanley Cups followed. This pattern defied conventional hockey wisdom. Elite playoff performers typically dominate regular seasons first. Kessel reversed the formula. The explanation for this contradiction goes beyond work ethic or mental toughness. There's a medical reason his body processed competition differently than his peers, a factor that shaped everything about how he played and why he succeeded when traditional metrics suggested he shouldn't. To understand that, you have to go back to the city that blamed him, the media that mocked him, and the years that nearly broke him. And the trade that sent him to Pittsburgh? One of the most lopsided in modern hockey. Boston drafted Kessel 5th overall in 2006 and watched him develop into a legitimate scoring threat. By 2009, he had posted 36 goals and established himself as one of the league's premier young wingers. Toronto saw potential and paid heavily for it. On September 18, 2009, the Maple Leafs surrendered their 2010 first-round pick, 2010 second-round pick, and 2011 first-round pick to acquire him. Those picks became Tyler Seguin, Jared Knight, and Dougie Hamilton. Toronto immediately signed Kessel to a 5-year, $27 million contract extension and positioned him as the franchise cornerstone. The team finished dead last in their division that first season. Kessel scored 30 goals. Over the next 5 years, he would score 30 or more goals 4 times, lead the team in points every single season, and average 65.6 points per year. Toronto made the playoffs once during his entire tenure, losing to Boston in the first round in 2013. The city needed someone to blame. Toronto's media environment operates differently from other markets. Scrutiny intensifies with each failure, and Kessel became the target. Columnists questioned his competitive level. Broadcasters suggested he lacked leadership. The narrative shifted from talented scorer to systemic problem. Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun published a column in July 2015 titled "Leafs Were Sick and Tired of Phil Kessel" that opened with an unverified story about Kessel buying hot dogs from a street vendor every afternoon. The piece described him as someone who didn't eat right, train right, or play right. The story went viral immediately. But what Simmons didn't know, what the entire Toronto media apparatus missed, was the context that made their criticism not just unfair, but cruel. Meanwhile, during all of this, Kessel was still casually scoring 25 to 30 goals a year while everyone debated his conditioning. The disconnect between perception and production was absurd. Randy Carlyle's defensive system required forwards to back-check aggressively and engage in board battles. Kessel's game centered on offense and transition speed. The coaching staff publicly questioned his leadership. Management made it clear he wasn't part of the long-term vision. The 2014-15 season collapsed entirely. Toronto fired Carlyle on January 15, 2015. The team finished with a dismal record, and Kessel led them with 61 points despite the chaos. New management hired Mike Babcock, who had no interest in building around Kessel. Both sides understood that the relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. Toronto wanted to rebuild through the draft. Kessel wanted an opportunity to win. The separation became inevitable. On July 1st, 2015, Pittsburgh acquired Phil Kessel, Tyler Biggs, Tim Erickson, and a conditional second-round pick. Toronto received Kasperi Kapanen, Scott Harrington, Nick Spalling, a conditional first-round pick that became Sam Steele, and a third-round pick. Toronto also retained $1.2 million of Kessel's annual salary for the remaining 7 years of his contract. The Maple Leafs believed they had extracted reasonable value while clearing salary and acquiring young assets. Kapanen would develop into a solid 20-goal winger who never came close to matching what Pittsburgh received. In retrospect, this trade would haunt Toronto for years. They had just handed their division rival the missing piece for a championship run. Penguins general manager Jim Rutherford wasn't trying to acquire a franchise centerpiece. He had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin for that. Rutherford wanted a complementary finisher who could convert chances without needing to create everything himself. As Rutherford explained after the trade, he was always the guy. He was the guy that was blamed when things weren't going well, and he doesn't have to be the guy here. We have a bunch of them, and so I believe that he's going to fit in very well. Pittsburgh deployed Kessel entirely differently from how Toronto had. His ice time dropped from over 21 minutes per game to around 18 minutes. Coach Mike Sullivan put him in a secondary role. On the power play, Kessel set up in the left circle, waiting for the one-timer opportunity. During even-strength play, he trailed zone entries, allowing Crosby or Malkin to carry the puck and draw defensive attention before finding him in space. The HBK line, Carl Hagelin, Nick Bonino, and Kessel, became Pittsburgh's most effective unit by operating as a secondary scoring threat that opponents couldn't adequately defend while focusing on the top line. The system clicked midway through the 2015-16 season after Sullivan replaced Mike Johnston as head coach. In Game 6 against Washington on May 10, 2016, he scored twice to give the Penguins a 3-0 lead. The Capitals rallied to tie at 3-3, but Nick Bonino scored in overtime to send Pittsburgh through. Washington coach Barry Trotz admitted, "I thought we did a real good job on Crosby and Malkin the whole series." They had forgotten about Phil. Kessel led Pittsburgh with 22 points through 24 playoff games. He narrowly lost the Conn Smythe Trophy to Crosby by 3 votes. On June 12, 2016, after the Penguins defeated San Jose in 6 games, Kessel stood on the ice at SAP Center holding the Stanley Cup, visibly emotional. Former Toronto GM Brian Burke, who had traded for Kessel in 2009, texted reporters that night, "Phil had a great playoff. It was cool to watch him lift the cup after all that frustration in Toronto. I never doubted that he could play at this level when it mattered most." A year after Toronto called him the problem, Phil Kessel was a Stanley Cup champion. Proof that the misfit shined most when everything was on the line. The hot dog story originated from Steve Simmons' July 2nd, 2015 column in the Toronto Sun. Simmons claimed a vendor at Front and John Street lost his, quote, most reliable customer when Kessel left Toronto, describing how Phil would wander from his condo almost every afternoon at 2:30 p.m. to buy hot dogs. The story had no verified source. Bloggers immediately fact-checked Simmons and discovered Kessel didn't even live near that intersection. Multiple reporters visited the corner and found vendors who had never even heard of Kessel. His sister Amanda confirmed in a 2018 Twitter Q&A, "Phil does not really love to eat hot dogs. He does eat hot dogs, sometimes maybe on the golf course, but no, he does not love to eat hot dogs." After winning his second Stanley Cup in 2017, Kessel posted an Instagram photo of himself eating hot dogs out of the trophy, a direct response to Simmons that acknowledged the joke while celebrating the vindication. But here's what nobody asked. Even if the essence of the criticism was true, that Kessel didn't follow conventional nutrition protocols, why could he get away with it? What made his body different? The answer to that question reframes everything about his career. And it starts with something that happened when he was just 19 years old. What the media didn't emphasize was the context behind Kessel's entire career. On December 11, 2006, at 19 years old, doctors diagnosed him with testicular cancer. He underwent surgery to remove his right testicle. The cancer was caught early and had not spread. He returned to the ice on January 9, 2007, missing only 11 games. Kessel later told CBS News, "What I learned is how fast life can change. I was young, starting my professional career. I couldn't wait to start my dream of playing in the NHL. I had to grow up a lot faster and face a new challenge." He was playing professional hockey after cancer treatment while the media questioned his conditioning. He was producing 30-goal seasons while management asked him to play a more physical style that didn't suit his skill set. Randy Carlyle's defensive system required forwards to back-check aggressively and engage in board battles. Kessel's game centered on offense and transition speed. The fit was terrible, but the coaching staff publicly questioned his leadership anyway. When Toronto media asked why he didn't train like everyone else, they didn't consider that Phil had already faced something far more challenging than any training regimen. He had stared down cancer at 19 and beaten it. He wasn't going to let anyone tell him how to manage his own body. Kessel didn't follow conventional athlete nutrition protocols. He didn't meal prep. He ate what he wanted when he wanted. Teammates acknowledged this openly without judgment. The essence of the criticism was accurate. He refused to conform to standard training and diet regimens. But the specifics were fabricated for effect, and the context was completely ignored. What made Kessel's approach work wasn't just stubbornness. Cancer treatment altered his physiology in ways most athletes never experience. Sports science recognizes that some elite performers respond better to less structured training. Usain Bolt famously avoided heavy weightlifting. Michael Phelps consumed 12,000 calories during peak training. Tom Brady's diet evolved into something so unconventional that teammates mocked it. Nikola Jokic drinks Coke and doesn't resemble a typical NBA athlete, yet he dominates at the highest level. Kessel fit this pattern. He understood his body better than any nutritionist or strength coach could. And the ultimate validation of his approach? He would go on to play over 1,000 consecutive games, setting an NHL record for durability.
We are here to celebrate an extraordinary achievement. Phil Kessel is a Stanley Cup champion.
The cancer survivor who supposedly lacked conditioning became the most durable player in league history. That durability came from listening to what his body needed rather than following someone else's blueprint. Kessel's refusal to conform looked like laziness until it produced 3 Stanley Cups and an Ironman streak. Then it looked like wisdom. Defending a championship requires surviving different pressure than winning one. In 2017, Pittsburgh entered the playoffs as the hunted rather than the hunters. Chris Letang missed significant time with an injury. The goaltending situation created uncertainty. Teams studied how to neutralize the HBK line. Kessel responded by posting 23 points in 25 playoff games, ranking 3rd in the entire league behind only Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. In Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals against Ottawa, he scored the only goal with 6:55 remaining for a 1-0 victory. In Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final against Nashville, he recorded 3 points in a 6-0 demolition that put Pittsburgh 1 win away from repeating. On June 11, 2017, the Penguins defeated Nashville 2-0 in Game 6 to capture their 2nd consecutive championship. Kessel had now played 49 playoff games across 2 springs, accumulating 45 points at .92 points per game. That playoff scoring rate placed him among the elite postseason performers in NHL history. Through 100 career playoff games, he recorded 34 goals and 49 assists for 83 points. Most Hall of Fame forwards never reach those totals in playoff competition. After Pittsburgh, Kessel signed with Arizona in 2019 and later joined Vegas in 2022. The narrative around those years focused less on production and more on endurance. On October 25th, 2022, playing for the Golden Knights against San Jose, Kessel appeared in his 990th consecutive regular season game, breaking Keith Yandle's record and establishing himself as the NHL's all-time Ironman. He extended the streak to 1,064 games before Vegas scratched him during the 2023 playoffs. The cancer survivor, who supposedly lacked durability, had become the most durable player in league history. Context reframes perception. Toronto finished dead last the season before trading Kessel and has made the playoffs consistently since rebuilding through the draft. They have also exited in the first round repeatedly, unable to generate the playoff scoring that Kessel provided. Pittsburgh won back-to-back championships immediately after acquiring him. The Maple Leafs got role players in return. Kapanen topped out at 20 goals. The rest were forgettable. They never replaced what they gave up. Toronto thought they were rebuilding correctly. They just handed their best playoff performer to a division rival who immediately won back-to-back cups. And when Phil finally hung up his skates, he posted one final message. Thanks for the hot dogs. Even at the end, he got the last laugh. 3 cups, 1,064 consecutive games. A cancer survivor who became an Iron Man. Toronto called him the problem. Pittsburgh called him the solution. A player who won by refusing to be anyone but himself. That's not a strange career. That's a statement. If you want more stories about the players the league tried to forget, subscribe to Skates and Scars. We tell the stories exactly where everyone else stops talking.